Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. We have about to start the discussion. Anyway, good afternoon from Indonesia, and also good morning, or maybe good, very morning for everyone that are not in the Indonesian or maybe GMT +7 time. Today we want to have a really interesting discussion about the UN Tax Convention, and for the technical things, we have an interpretation that it can be both ways from Indonesia to English and also from English to Indonesia. So everyone, please, if you want to use it wisely, you can just click the interpretation label on the below of the uh, Zoom link. And I want to pass this event to start to the moderator, Mbak Herni Ramdhaningrum, to start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Samira. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, good day, esteemed audience. My name is Herni Ramdhaningrum. I am a program manager of the PRAKARSA, and I will be your moderator for today. So, firstly, I would like to express my gratitude for the 5 distinguished speakers joining us in this hybrid webinar. Everyone coming from around the world is here right now from Geneva, Nepal, from Europe, and from Asia. And all speakers are widely recognized for their remarkable experience in advocating for and advancing the development of fair and equitable taxation system. So in modern economic system, we often hear about the freedom of individuals to optimize their potential in economic activities and benefit from them. However, we also know that this has led to a stark division. One group comprises producer, the wealth, while the other consists of mere consumers, the less affluent, or in extreme situation, the poor. And on a global scale, this division is further shaped by the long history of colonialism, where former colonizing nations gain significant advantages by exploiting natural and human resources. And the capital accumulated from this exploitation allowed them to develop their country substantially. And consequently, the world has been divided into developed and developing countries. With their wealth, nations in the global north have maintained a dominant position in the global economic system, acting as financiers or investors, while nations in the global south often bear the weight of supporting this system. Northern countries do not merely invest, they also engineer the system to maximize their benefits. Thus, the taxation system, which should serve as a corrective tools to address economic inequality, have become instrument for wealth nations and investors, primarily in the global north, to minimize their tax obligations. And as economic activities expand beyond extractive industries into digital economies, these wealthy nations have further influenced the global tax system to protect their interests. This dominance is closely tied to the influence of the northern countries, particularly those in the OECD, which claim the capacity to design a system that appear fair. And in response to this, government, most notably in Africa and Asia, with the movement spreading to other regions and with the support from civil society organizations, have advocated for a global tax authority inclusive for all nations. And this pushed the United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. And to amplify our today's spirit, just yesterday we have heard that the UN member states have once again voted to support inclusive and effective tax cooperation by adopting the UN Tax Convention. So I think today's discussion is just in time, and also perhaps to celebrate what we have heard from yesterday and also to amplify our advocacy works. And with this vote, UN member states are now set to begin negotiating the text of the UN Tax Convention on 2 early protocols in February 2025. And we also really happy to hear that the result of the voting, where 125 in favors, 46 in abstentions, and 9 against. If I'm not mistaken, this against country is less than the one before, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. So now to delve deeper into our concept on the UN Tax Convention, we will now have a discussion and hear all perspective from our esteemed speakers coming from diverse regions. And before we start our discussion, please allow me to introduce all the speakers to all audience. So first we have Dr. Esther Sri Astuti, who usually called by Miss Esa. She is Executive Director of INDEF with over 16 years of experience in economic research, focusing on agriculture and food sectors. She holds a doctorate from Maastricht University and has contributed to the policy analysis at national and international level since 2028. The second speaker, we have Dr. Arjun Kumar Karki, Executive President of RRN, Rural Reconstruction of Nepal, and Global Coordinator of LDC Watch. Mr. Arjun, also former ambassador of Nepal to the US and 7 other countries, with 20 years of experience, more than 20 years of experience in diplomacy and development. He is also now the co-coordinator of the Tax and Fiscal Justice Asia. And we also very happy to have Ms. Tove Maria Riding, policy coordinator at Eurodad, focusing on tax justice and transparency, co-author reports on Europe's role in tax-related capital flight and harmful tax practices, and she presents Europe in the Global Alliance for Tax Justice and coordinates policy effort across more than 50 organizations and more in more 20 countries. And last but not least, we have Antonio Salvador. Tony, he is labor lawyer and tax justice consultant for Third World Network with expertise in labor right and international taxation. He holds an LLM from University of Illinois, a JD from Ateneo de Manila, and has specialization on tax training, PwC Price Water. Yeah, member of the Philippine Bar since 1992. So, and also we have Miss Meliana Lambantoruan. She's Indonesian, but her name is super difficult to spell. And we are sorry that we actually expect Miss Meliana to be with us here on site, but unfortunately she's unwell right now. But thank you very much for Meli that is still with us today by online. Meli is Deputy Director of Publish What You Pay Indonesia, specializing in global value chains, extractive governance, community advocacy, and poverty alleviation. She previously led research on beneficial ownerships, illicit financial flows, and natural resource revenue sharing in Indonesia. So without further ado, I would like first invite Mbak Esther. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Before we start to Mbak Esa, we would like to hear like opening remark from Ahmad Tuhan, the Executive Director of PRAKARSA, to welcome everyone and to explain about our today's important meeting.
Okay. Good morning to colleagues in Europe, especially to our best friend, Tove. Good afternoon to all colleagues here and in Zoom, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with introduce myself. My name is Aha Maftuhan. You can call me Maftu. An executive director of the PRAKARSA. I'm also coordinator of Indonesia Tax Justice Forum. It is my great honor to extend a warm welcome to you all. It is also our important session, as Herni mentioned before. It is just timely because the General Assembly of UN on the UN Tax Convention did yesterday, and member countries at the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly voted to adopt the mandates for the new global tax rule. The term of reference for the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. And I think with this vote, UN member countries are now set to begin negotiating the text of the UN Tax Convention. And I think it is a big achievement for the tax justice movement across the globe. Friends and colleagues, why do we need to discuss the role of the UN Tax Convention? I think because the UN Tax Convention will represent a critical international initiative to address some issues regarding taxation, especially regarding the problem of illicit financial flows, the problem of tax evasion, avoidance across border countries, the unupdated tax architecture system at the global fora, etc. But the other things that the reason why need to discuss the role of tax convention is about the global economic landscape right now. They're already interconnected and already cross-border activities happen in all part of the economic zone across the globe. So, friends and colleagues, I think it is our chance, since we are still struggling in regard to making sure of the work and contribution of civil society organization to strengthening tax and fiscal justice. We should use the good news from the UN General Assembly as our modality to continue our work. So let us keep our collaboration to continue our effort to create a fair tax system globally. And I'm sure that the fair tax system will give countries equal opportunity to mobilize revenue strongly for financing the development at the domestic as well as a global level. Last but not the least, on behalf of the PRAKARSA and Indonesia Tax Justice Forum, once again, I would like to thank to the speakers, to the colleagues who attends online and in person here. We have colleagues not only from civil society organization, but also from the government representative from the multilateral organizations such as UN and OECD and other organizations. So I would like to wish all of us in productive discussion. Thank you for the secretariat, Samira, Dio, and others to prepare this event. And once again, I thank you, and back to moderator.
Thank you, Mas Maftu, for the opening remark. So now, without further ado, I will first invite Dr. Esa, Miss Esa, Executive Director of INDEF, who is now in Geneva. Thank you very much for providing us your time before your tight meeting schedule in Geneva. Uh, for you, Miss Esa, we would like to hear and please enlighten us on how global tax alignment under the UN Tax Convention could accommodate varying economic structure, policy priorities, and revenue needs across different countries, especially for developing countries, including Indonesia, Nepal, and other developing countries in Asia and Africa. So the floor is yours, Mbak Esa.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Herni. Good morning, Mas Maftu, and Mr. Arjun, Mr. Tony, Mrs. Maria, and ladies, Mbak Melia, yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the invitation. I would like to share my idea, yeah, related to the fair global tax environment. Can I share my own screen? Because I think it is comfortable if I can share by myself. Yeah, sorry. Yes, wait a minute. Yeah, here you are. Yeah. Yeah, regarding of the target of the Indonesian government, President Prabowo already targeted, for the economic growth is 8%. And as we know, to achieve the economic growth is 8%, it is not easy, to catch up the number, because the historical number of economic growth in Indonesia is around 4 until 5%. And then we need to achieve, to attract more investment from domestic and from foreign. However, we know that it is not easy to achieve the target of the investment realization. And why we need to achieve to attract more investment, because we need to create more employment. So that very ambitious target, as I know. And we have a 8 presidential mission, or we call it Astacita. President Prabowo already launched Astacita toward the Golden Indonesia 2045. First, four main sector is green economy, blue economy, infrastructure development, developing human resources, and downstreaming industry. And as we know that the historical tax revenue trend is decreasing, we only achieved the tax revenue target in 2021, 2022, and 2023. This is because of the booming price commodity. And if we see that the trend tax ratio from 1972 until 2023, we see that the trend tax ratio is decreasing and relative low. Nowadays, the tax ratio in Indonesia is about 10%. And we see the fiscal budget expenditure is more allocated for routine budget or routine expenditure or regulatory expenditure So it should be capital expenditure is larger than regular expenditure. Well, this is the other way around. And we still have a high debt cost, yeah. Regarding the debt costs compared to any other countries, for example, Singapore, yeah, Malaysia, yeah, Vietnam, Indonesia has a high debt cost. Yeah, this is the interest rate of government bond. We launched the interest rate of government bonds 7.2%, while the others is only about 2 until 4%. Yeah. So I think we have a small fiscal space. So therefore, the Indonesian government launched the tax reform journey, yeah, because to generate more income, to generate more tax revenue. This is the tax reform journey from 1980s until 2022. Yeah, it is related to the bureaucratic reform, yeah, internal control improvement, yeah. In 2000, from 1980s until 1990, the tax reform only happens in 1983, yeah, tax law reform, and 1991 until 2000. And in 2000s, we have a bureaucratic reform. And then in 2010 until 2020, we have several tax reform, such as internal control improvement, yeah, organizational transformation, tax reform program, renewal tax administration system, and etc. This is the pillar of tax reform, yeah. This is I got from our key source person, yeah, from Directorate General Pajak, yeah. And to have a good tax reform, we not only need the regulation, but we need to prepare the facilities and infrastructure. We also prepare the budget, yeah, and synergy of any other parties, yeah. Not only Ministry of Finance, but also any other ministries, yeah, in Indonesia. And regarding to the viral, the VAT, yeah, value added tax revenue trends, yeah, as we know that in the Indonesian government aims to increase the tax revenue from VAT, yeah, as we know that the VAT revenue trends is increasing, yeah, from time by time. We see that compared to any other countries in ASEAN, yeah, only Indonesia and Laos has only Cambodia, Indonesia, and Laos has a high VAT, yeah, and also Philippines, yeah. However, yeah, I think it is not correct or the right policy, yeah, to generate more tax revenue, yeah, by increasing VAT rate, yeah. Why? Because if we increase the VAT rate, so it means that we increase, yeah, the production and consumption costs, and it will give impact on lower purchasing power, yeah, and then weakening utilization and sales, and of course, energy absorption work decrease, yeah, or more unemployment, yeah. So it is it causes reduced income, reduced consumption and the final we can reduce our economic growth. So it is a bad idea to increase VAT rate right now, yeah, because we already had a deflation for 5 months from May to September. And a second impact, if we increase VAT, so it means that we will increase the inflation based on our experience, yeah. When the Indonesian government increased VAT rate from 10 to 11%, so the inflation rate also increasing. And then we seen that from the realization of tax revenue based on tax type of and sector, yeah, is yes indeed that VAT contribute dominantly to the tax revenue. So we need to, I think, yeah, the good idea is how to increase not VAT, yeah, but maybe this is income tax. We need to increase, yeah. This is income tax, yeah. Also need to increase. Why? Because the rich person, the rich people should pay more tax. If we increase VAT rate, so yeah, ordinary people also pay tax more, yeah. And then the second idea is how to increase or make a diversification on excise tax. As we know that excise tax is can generate revenue, yeah, and also discourage harmful behavior and address externalities, yeah. For example, for fuel, yeah, sugar, tobacco, alcohol, and luxury goods. Yeah, this is the principle of indirect and excess tax, as we know that excess tax can also make efficiency, yeah, revenue generation, simplicity, and of course, is guide to the market expectation. And so the most important thing why we need to diversify our excise tax, because nowadays the Indonesian government only rely on tobacco excise tax for the excise tax revenue. Well, we still have many other excise tax. For example, plastic, yeah, fuel, alcohol, sugar tax, yeah. It's already implemented in any other countries, yeah. So the tax design principle, if we implement the excise tax, so we reduce the harmful product, and we also can generate more government revenue. This is the excise tax can be implemented at a specific tax and ad valorem tax. Yeah, it depends on the product. Yeah, for example, we can also tax alcohol by using specific tax. Well, the others, for example, sugar or maybe We can also tax sugar product, yeah, by using ad valorem tax, yeah. This is the advantages if we implement the excise tax, yeah, for any other products. First, yeah, we link to harm or externalities, yeah, provide predictable revenue and simple administer and understand. Well, the others, disadvantage, we need to see which product can be applied or not. Yeah. This is the global trend of excise tax structure. As we know that not only in Indonesia, but also any other countries, tax alcohol products, sugar tax, and plastic, yeah, to avoid the harmful products to consume in Indonesia. Thank you. I will stop my presentation. Thank you so much.
There are a lot of
Mm.
situation that you mentioned about Indonesia right now. And since you have to leave in 5 minutes, so if you don't mind, we have one questions for you before you go in related to the current situation and to the development of this UN tax conventions, especially the voting result that we just heard yesterday. So given the volatile situation that we are facing now, how do you think the UN tax convention helps developing countries to tackle the situation, especially what we are now deal with? And will the UN tax convention encourage the government to have other alternative tax revenue rather than taxing poor people more, like increasing the VAT to 12% that the government just mentioned recently?
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Herni. Yeah, yeah. As I know, yeah, if we give a commitment to the international society, yeah, so we need to comply on our commitment. However, we also before give the commitment, so the Indonesian government should consider what kind of consequences that we will receive if we commit on that UN tax. As I know, we have a small fiscal space, yeah, on the fiscal budget. So I believe that the Indonesian government aims to increase more higher tax rate. However, yeah, we have a commitment to the UN treaty, yeah, for our, yeah, we already commit to the UN Model Convention, especially for OECD Model Tax Convention on Income and on Capital. The most important things is how to implement the UN Convention tax in Indonesia. And we see that we have a target on investment. So I believe that if, for example, if we apply to a global minimum tax, yeah, so we need to consider. So this is the tax will not attract more investor. We have to attract more investor by another way, yeah. And then because in the future maybe we cannot launch tax holiday, yeah, we cannot launch the any tax incentive. Yeah, many tax incentive, and I believe if we see the collective, for example, if we refer to UN model, yeah, for example, the collective investment vehicle, yeah, we have to see which our objective. If our objective, yeah, to support, yeah, for example, electrical vehicle due to the green economy. So I believe that it is the UN convention can be a positive impact on Indonesia to support the development of green economy. Well, the others, so we need to consider again, ya. Demikian Mbak Herni.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mbak Esther. Very interesting argument to link the UN Tax Convention impact to perhaps the new economic concept, like green economy concept that the government is trying to push right now. Again, thank you very much, Mbak. Wish you all the best in Geneva with all the meetings there. So now I would like to, and then we will discuss again about this perspective on the advantage or perhaps the disadvantage of supporting the UN Tax Convention, especially for the developing countries, from Tony and Tove. But now I would like to have a discussion from Mr. Arjun Kumar Karki, since he's one of the most experienced persons in the civil society, and then since he is also now the co-coordinator of Tax and Fiscal Justice Forum in Asia, we would like to hear perhaps like the strategy that the civil society should take in influencing tax policy and promoting transparency and raising awareness about the fair tax practices in the international cooperation. And with this UN tax conventions vote, what kind of the strategy that the civil society should take in advocating or pushing further the UN tax convention in order to obtain our expected goal, especially for the developing countries and the work of the civil society organization. The floor is your Mr. Arjun.
Thank you, Harni. Thank you very much for giving me chance to speak as second speaker. And before I start talking about the issue that you have asked me to speak, I would like to thank and congratulate PRAKARSA and also Maftu, Harni, and your team for organizing this very important virtual, in fact, a hybrid meeting on the issue of tax. And also, as you have highlighted, that this is timely for another reason, that yesterday the Finance and Economic Committee of the United Nations approved the draft TOR for the tax convention. So this is another big achievement in our fight for tax justice. And you have seen that majority of United Nations member states voted in favor of TOR. There are few, but very powerful countries are in opposition to this. So we should be mindful of that as well. And you have rightly said that how we as civil society group become more influential in order to make this happen. So in my opinion, one of the mistakes as civil society group we often do is we speak to ourselves. Look at this meeting. We are talking to ourselves. Okay, we try to bring like-minded people and we discuss among ourselves. So we should really get rid of that. So we should really try to speak to people and group and countries who doesn't agree with us. So in civil society movement, we often use a language, pressure and partnership. I used to say that when I was president of Federation of Nepali NGO long time back, I used to say that we use 2P strategy: P, pressure and partnership. So those who are like-minded, those who support us, we partner with them. For those who don't really support our agenda, we should really work as a pressure group. So 2P strategy. And okay, similarly, we should also speak to high-ranking UN officials, those who are in the system of bureaucracy within the United Nations. We should also really get first-hand information and intelligence from that, so that we understand what are the conspiracy are going on against us, or what are the opportunity available for us to influence. Because I used to work with so many friends, those who are within the United Nations bureaucracy. They used to give us so much of intelligence so that we could devise our strategy in order to make our work successful. Similarly, we should use various actors involved who can be influential. For example, the Nepali group had a meeting with parliamentarian last week in Nepal. We have invited 3 different parliamentary committee chairmen and also their member to one place. So Public Account Committee, Public Finance Committee, and also Economic and Good Governance Committee of our parliamentarian were invited. And also we had a very good interaction with them, and we have mentioned that why tax justice, what is tax justice, why we want tax justice, why many of us are against BAT, because everyone, this was a big subject in our meeting. Billionaire and also people, homeless people are asked to pay same level of BAT. So this is not fair. This is not just. Rich people, billionaire, rich company, they often get tax evasion. They take advantage. They get tax exemption from government also, because they are very influential among the people who make decision in our respective countries. And also, sometimes they are very influential in international institutions as well. So we try to create awareness without saying that we want to create awareness among the honorable member of parliament. So we had a very good interaction. And we urge them, there is a possibility of United Nations Tax Convention. So we, for example, we are from Nepal. We told them we are also in the committee of FFD, a drafting committee in Nepal. They can also speak to our foreign ministry, our foreign minister, our finance minister, and our diplomat, assigned to deal with these issues, so that they defend our national interest. They defend our agenda in international negotiations. And often, diplomats from our developing country or least developed country in international negotiations, often they lack capacity, and sometimes they lack intelligence as well. So we need to create a pressure both at home and also abroad. At the same time, we need to build alliance with like-minded people. Often we say that there is North and South and there is South and North. So our friend, Maria is here, with us. So we have a good friend, Hero, Dad, and several others, European, American alliances, networks who work with us very closely. So there should be North-South collaboration in order to forging alliances and also develop a synergy of our effort in order to defend justice and good governance globally. So we must not work in isolation. This is often, this is the weak mistake we often make. We always try to bring like-minded people, our friends, our comrades, and we speak among ourselves, and we feel very proud. No one is going to challenge you. So we look for comfort zone, but we should really try to make an effort to confront, forge alliance with the like-minded people, but also confront with people who really try to promote anti-people, anti-poor agenda at various levels. In short, this is what I wanted to say. I'm not saying something new. I am sure all of you are aware of this. This is what I have learned in my 30 years multi-level advocacy work. So these days, if we work in isolation, if we work with the like-minded people only, we cannot make an effort to really defeat. Our enemies are really very strong and powerful. They network, they forge alliance, they try to get support. In terms of number in the United Nations, look at this number. We have shared in our network, they are very small, but they are very powerful. US voted against it. Most European countries voted against it. Most rich countries voted against it. So that means they are small in number in terms of United Nations voting system. Because UN is the reason why we promoted UN in terms of dealing with not only on tax issue, because we long back, okay, in the 90s, we were having similar kind of campaign within the United Nations system and United Nations member state for financing for a summit on financing for development. So it was realized only in 2000, we started to negotiate and have a prepcom of FFD process in around 1999. We had this FFD in Monterrey. I was one of the civil society representative to address the United Nations General Assembly on financing for development in Monterrey. So we worked very hard at that time, and we tried to forge alliance, and there were a very interesting experience of our negotiation on financing for development in Monterrey. I often share this with to my civil society colleague. We had worked very closely with G77 plus China. At that time, G77 plus China was chaired by Philippines. There was a very dynamic ambassador of Philippines based in Newark. So he used to consult us every day. We used to have every evening meeting with civil society and G77 plus China. In fact, upon our request, they boycotted the UN negotiation on financing for development declaration twice upon our request, because we had a very strong reservation against the appointment of IMF chief as UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Financing for Development. In fact, I was sharing a panel with Kofi Annan same day. So I was one of the civil society representatives. In front of Kofi Annan, I said that I condemn Secretary General decision on appointment of as his special envoy and financing for development. So we need to force. Again, I conclude my statement by saying that, again, 2P strategy, pressure and partnership. We have to partner, and we also exert our pressure in order to make a success in our fight for justice and inequality. Thank you very much. I have to apologize to all of you because I am on the road. I decided to stop where I could get good internet connection. I have 3 hours more to drive to reach my home. So despite my interest to engage with you, I had to really leave soon. And I hope you will allow me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arjun, for very insightful explanation and safe drive to your home. But I would like to echoing what you just said, that as the CSOs, we often find ourselves speaking within our own, and then sometimes we forgot that engaging the prominent level is actually providing a more impactful process. For instance, like in Indonesia, sometimes among the CSOs itself, we need to have some time to observe the new decision from the global and from the national level to understand what are actually the behind messages of that agreement. And but of course that is something that we need to overcome. Sometimes that can be also a strategy from the policymaker to control our participations, right? Well, actually we have that capacity and we have to be confident. And then I think that as the CSOs, we have been engaging with many multilateral platform, including the one that you just mentioned, G77, G20, G7. Despite sometimes that engagement process is more procedural, but I think that the continuation or our persistency can increase our engagement to the level of pressure, and then we hopefully that we will be seen as the equal partner by those people who consider themselves to have capacity and have right to decide the policy. Okay, thank you very much again, Mr. Arjun.
Yeah. Again, one small point, okay, just to footnote to what Arnie said. In fact, this reminded me, okay, you have said that a restricted access to in many occasions, many negotiations. This reminds me a training program I went to on lobbying and advocacy in 1991. One of our instructors used to say that if you have no access, you go to near to toilet, stand there. Every VIP, every whoever, okay, whether they are president, prime minister, minister, whoever, they at some point of that they come to toilet.
That
and
is very
get hold of them. Okay, don't go literally, but that means you have to make an effort, every effort. Try to get hold of them on the road or okay, somewhere in the corridor or passages. So you have to. This is a fight. We have to make an effort. We have to. They ask us to get accreditation, and we apply for accreditation and go and speak. So I am not disagreeing with Arnie, but I really support your idea. There is restriction, but we still try to make an effort so that our voices are made heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very wise advice. I think for most of participants here who are very young, we have time to learn many things from you, Mr. Arjun, based on your experience in engaging the policymakers at every level. Thank you. And for the next speaker, we have Meliana Lumbantoruan, the Deputy Director of Publish What You Pay Indonesia. And then we have a discussion several times, PRAKARSA and Publish What You Pay, on this UN Tax Convention. We also discuss about the importance of increase the capacity and to strengthen the understanding of among the CSOs to understand this UN Tax Convention. We also discuss about how this UN Tax Convention be seen and how the CSO see this UN Tax Convention compared to the BEPS, and how these two framework impact global tax fairness. And also we would like to know how to protect developing countries taxing rights and reducing tax avoidance by multinational cooperation if we use between these two frameworks. Perhaps based on our previous discussion among the Indonesia CSOs, Meliana can also bring up the cases from the perspective of Indonesia CSO. So the floor is yours, Mbak Meli.
Okay, thank you so much, Mbak Herni. Good morning and good afternoon for everyone. Actually, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak today. When we talk about the UN Tax Convention and how is the role of this convention addressing or countering the BAPs. And actually, for today, what I will share is more like an introduction why the UN Tax Convention is important and what the key benefits are for developing countries. Because this is really important to be clearly understood that this UN Tax Convention, it should be understood by a broader civil society or maybe society at the grassroots level like that. So when we talk about advocating for the UN Tax Convention, we have to make sure that all layers of society can grasp it clearly, even to the grassroots level. We have to make sure that they have to understand what we are collectively now advocating for the UN Tax Convention, because we have to consider when we talk about the taxes, in reality, every segment of society will be affected. So yeah, they should be know why the UN Tax Convention is matter to all the level of society. Yeah. We know that there is a condition about the global tax fairness is essential for reducing inequality, because when we talk about a fair global tax system, it gonna be help to reduce economic disparity between countries, and it's gonna be support the inclusive development, especially for the developing country. And we know that developing country often struggle to protect their taxing right due to the unfair tax treaty. There is practices from the multinational corporation doing like tax avoidance, tax evasion practices like that. And when we talk about the UN Tax Convention, this convention seeks to combat the global tax avoidance and establish more equitable taxation system for all countries. Particularly, it's going to be benefiting the developing country. The third one, when we talk about the UN Tax Convention that have aimed to address the tax avoidance and to ensure there is equity on that, this convention is want to establish like a more equitable taxation system for all country, particularly when the convention is going to be support the developing country on formulating stronger and more relevant tax policy to boost the domestic revenue. And it gonna be also gonna be like tools to introduce measure to prevent the tax-based erosion, ensuring the tax revenue remain within the sources country. And when this convention is talk about the equity, the convention could be the counter of OECD BAPS framework with a focus on the needs of the developing country. Next. That's the point of why the UN Tax Convention matter. And the other side, we're gonna see there's a benefit when we advocate for the UN Tax Convention. It's the UN Tax Convention is gonna be help the low middle income country to develop robust tax policy that address their unique challenges, such as revenue mobilization and fiscal sovereignty like that. And the low middle income country can strengthen their ability to tax income generated with their borders, particularly from the MNC operating in sector like natural resources and also in the digital economy. And by providing a framework for progressive tax policy, the convention is encourage low middle income countries to adopt policy that promote equity, reduce inequality, and align to the sustainable development goals. And the benefit when we talk about this convention is also helping the low middle income country to build the technical expertise and administrative capacity to implement the effective tax regimes. And there is a critical that the low middle income countries as a host resource intensive or consumer driven industry, but lack the bargaining power to enforce the fair taxing right. So the convention is going to ensure that the low middle income country retain the right to profits derived from the natural resources, labor, or maybe like from the consumer basis, rather than losing them to the tax haven or home country to the MNC. Next. Oh no, still in the the previous, yeah. The third one, the benefit from the UN Tax Convention is to the low middle income country is the convention is gonna introduce the global standard and practice to improve transparency to curb the tax avoidance practices such as the profit shifting and illicit financial flow. And the UN Tax Convention also can be a very approach to global tax decision making, particularly for the developing country. And unlike the OECD that have a limited partnership, and the UN Tax Convention ensure that there is an equal participation for all country and amplifying the voice of the low middle income country in shaping the global tax. And this convention is also important because it can emphasizing the sustainable and inclusive growth, because the convention is aligned to the global tax policy with the broader international development goals. Next. Yeah, UN Tax Convention can be the alternative to the BEPS framework because, in my opinion, it provides the equitable governance with the universal representation, and it also addresses gaps left by BEPS, like in extractive industry taxation. And this convention also linked the tax policy with the SDGs goals, and this convention also support the low middle income country with the capacity building the technical assistance. Next. Yep. This one is like an update, but earlier Ms. Mbak Herning already mentioned about this good news. And regarding this condition, we must work together to oversee the entire process, especially for those of us here our country have endorsed or expressed support for this convention. And we see that in the data that on average, many developed countries have chosen to abstain or even against for this. And therefore, this becomes a challenge to moving forward for us, especially for the civil society, to answer the progress of this process. What is important is how can we ensure that each country's readiness for the implementation process. We also need to look at what needs to be improved in our respective country that Mr. Arjun already stated before. So many kinds of work that we can do, like to do pressure and do the partnership in all the level of the playing field on the prominent actor in the government or etc. So yeah, we still have so many homework to oversee these UN tax convention processes. Next. Yes, this is last not but least, but in my opinion, the UN Tax Convention can be one of the choice of level playing field for the developing countries in the global tax governance. And using this convention is gonna be reduce the revenue losses from the tax-based erosion, and it's also can addresses the inequality in taxing right. And in short, this initiative seeks to establish a more equitable global tax system that minimize the tax avoidance, strengthen revenue collection, and promote sustainable development. So the UN Tax Convention is transformative opportunity to reshape the global tax system by prioritizing the equity, transparency, so the low middle income country can protect their tax basis, assert their fiscal sovereignty, and foster the inclusive economic growth. Yep, that's all my presentation. Maybe Tove is gonna be completed my presentation because Tove is one of the persons that's also have advocated so many times to the UN Tax Convention. Thank you so much, Mbak Herni.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Meli. I do agree with you, Mbak Meli. We will hear more about this UN Tax Convention from Tove and Tony. But I really like the points that you mentioned, Mbak Meli, that this UN Tax Convention grants fair taxing rights for developing countries. And as I have a reflection that as developing countries, we often see the investment and attract investment unconditionally, assuming it will generate employment and boost our economic growth. And I think we need to change this approach because this approach tend to treat investment more as aid than mutual partnership to gain beneficial economic partnership. And I think it is crucial to shift this mindset to ensure that investment not only drive growth but also contribute equitably to national revenues with a more fair tax system. So, of course, we need to hear more about this UN Tax Convention from Tove. So, yeah, Tove, the floor is yours, but we also would like to hear more about how this UN Tax Convention in addressing tax avoidance by multinational cooperation and high net worth individuals to protect tax base and ensure public service funding. So yeah, go ahead, Tove.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Meli, for a great presentation. Yeah, I think I can definitely build on that. Also going back to Arjun's point about pressure and partnership, I think here in Europe, we have a partnership with you, our colleagues around the world. When it comes to our governments, it's mostly pressure. We have some very, very fundamental differences with the way our governments are behaving and how they're voting. That said, the pressure is working. We're really moving forward at the moment. A lot is happening. They're not going to love this because we come from a system where the rich countries, they had the dream that they could set the global tax rules among themselves and then make everybody else follow the rules. It never really worked, but they're a bit slow to give up on that dream. But of course, the UN Tax Convention is a true revolution in how we make global tax rules. And it's been a long history. This issue has been discussed for over 100 years. It was discussed in the League of Nations before the United Nations even existed. But in short, they used to discuss tax. And if you look at the Charter of the United Nations, tax was always supposed to be covered by the mandate of the United Nations. But in the 1950s, suddenly some of the OECD countries argued strongly for closing down the United Nations work on tax. And they had arguments such as, well, the work is finished. And then shortly after, the OECD opened up its work on tax, and then they started to adopt something that they called global tax rules. They were never globally adopted. You can say we actually don't have a global decision on tax. But the OECD countries have been calling the rules that they have written, they have called them global tax rules. And the big discussion that led to the conflict between developed and developing countries was the question of if you have a multinational corporation Should it pay taxes only in the country where the headquarters is? Or should it also pay tax in the countries where it has economic activities, but it doesn't have a headquarter? One extreme example is extractive industries, for example. It's very clear that the countries where resources are extracted, that is the core of the whole business model. But what the developed countries argued was that the taxes should be paid where the headquarters is. And of course, that's because most of the corporate headquarters are in developed countries. So basically what the developed countries were saying is that we should have the right to tax corporate profits. This was a long fight, and that was a key reason why they wanted to control the global tax rules. But something else happened, which was that with this headquarter taxing approach, and because the OECD countries themselves failed to have clear, effective rules and cooperation, suddenly we had the phenomena of tax havens that came up very big and is still a very, very big issue. And it basically meant that instead of being taxed in the countries where they have business or the headquarter countries, actually multinational corporations ended up being taxed nowhere because some countries specialized in offering loopholes and harmful tax practices and being a tax haven. And so the corporations went there. And there comes the reason why many multinational corporations have had extremely low tax rates. Sometimes we're talking less than 1%. These numbers are normally secret, but we know some examples. We have, for example, Apple in 2010 had their profits located in Ireland, and there they had a tax rate of 0.005%. It's completely extreme how low the tax rates have been sometimes. For the extractive industries, there are also special loopholes. It's sometimes very difficult to value the resources that get moved from one country to another. And the tax rules we have, they're just not fit for purpose. But because we had the tax havens, it actually meant that first developing countries were losing out because the rules were written to favor the rich countries. But then the rich countries started losing out as well because the money landed in tax havens. And together with the corporations, we also had the world's richest individuals. Of course, most of us know about the way that rich people can open a secret bank account or find ways to allocate their wealth so that they are not the official owner. And that's how you can make sure that you don't have to pay tax. When we then had the situation that the world's richest people and biggest corporations, they were abusing the tax system and using international loopholes to not pay tax, it meant that the people that can't run away, they started getting taxed much more, the consumers, the workers, and that's how we ended up in this tax system where sometimes we have the poor paying more tax than the rich, both as a percentage of their income, definitely, but sometimes even in absolute terms, because sometimes you can actually design, if you're a wealthy person, you can design your capital income so that you have very, very low tax rates. So it's regressive. The tax system serves to make inequalities worse instead of reducing inequalities, both within countries and between countries. And we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about an absolutely crucial policy tool. If the tax system doesn't work, that the government can't get a stable and good revenue income. That's how we see debt levels increasing. That's how we see austerity. We see development underfunded. So this is a very, very important global challenge to fix. And yes, then we had a huge momentum for change come. Of course, the Africa group started this movement to have a UN convention on tax, and now we can see from the voting result yesterday, a lot is happening. We have a very, very strong coalition of developing countries that have come together and created this momentum for having a UN tax convention. And indeed, now 9 countries voted no. We started with 48 countries voting no a year ago. So the resistance is falling apart. And it's very interesting to see what's going on because, yes, it's a problem that we have 9 very big and wealthy countries that vote no to the UN Tax Convention. We had all of the EU that abstained. That's a problem. But it's not something we can't solve. In fact, they have a bigger problem than we have because they are afraid that developing countries will do something that they have done in the United Nations before. And that is to say, if you don't want to cooperate with us, if you're not interested in negotiating a global agreement that works for everybody, then we will go on our own. We want a global agreement. We want to make an agreement with you. But if you are so uncooperative, then we will have to do our own system. And if you look at the numbers from yesterday, if 10 countries in the global south do a tax agreement and say we're going to do tax in our way, that's not going to work. 125 countries sitting down and saying this is how we want the tax system to be designed, that's a different story. That could work. And we've seen before that, especially when it comes to multinational corporations, developing countries have sometimes said, if your corporations want to come and do business in my country, it has to follow my rules. So it's called access and benefit sharing when developing countries say your corporations cannot have access unless we have an agreement on how to make sure that everyone will benefit from this. Especially when it comes to extractive industries, if they don't have a place they can come and extract resources, it doesn't work. They have to have access. And therefore, it is a very powerful position that developing countries are in. But what we're seeing right now is that developing countries have not given up on the global agreement. They are, what the African negotiators said yesterday, is they are offering an olive branch. They are stretching out a hand. They're telling developed countries, we want to negotiate with you. But what they're saying no to is if you're coming here to block the process and make sure that there is no UN agreement, that's not going to work for us. Then we're going to go ahead on our own. And this is a very, very interesting situation. We're doing our very best in Europe. Europe has abstained yesterday. The European Union was not voting yes or no. That's not okay, because the agreement that was voted on yesterday, the terms of reference, the EU played a very active role in the negotiation of those terms of reference, and they were watered down because the EU countries wanted it. So the EU has been part of the negotiation. Then they should also vote yes, and we have told them that. But obviously, they've gone from voting no to abstaining. So we're hoping that we'll get to the point where the EU will be constructive and supportive, but it's not constructive not to vote yes to the agreement that you have been part of negotiating. Another interesting thing that the EU said yesterday, that they said that they insist on the decisions in the negotiation to be taken by consensus. They say we should not move forward with the UN Tax Convention unless all countries agree. And this is something they're saying a lot here in Brussels as well now. And the thing we don't understand is for over 50 years, the European Union, the EU member states, they have been sitting in the OECD, adopting global tax rules that were never adopted by consensus. In fact, a third of the world's countries were never part of the negotiations. And you were happy to sit and adopt those rules at the OECD. Why was that okay with you? Why were you okay with negotiating rules at the OECD, which had much less support than what we now have at the UN? How come at the UN, if it's not consensus, you refuse to be part of it? Whereas when it's at the OECD, you're okay with it. And in fact, the EU is still very actively telling developing countries they have to implement the agreements from the OECD, even though the developing countries, that so many of them never said yes to these rules. So right now there is an obvious contradiction in the EU position, and we're highlighting this, and we find it's extremely important that the EU changes its position. But we are seeing signs of movement, and one of the big arguments that we have is that tax havens is actually a big problem in the EU as well. Some of the EU member states are some of the world's biggest tax havens, but some of the other EU member states are countries with high tax rates that are losing a lot of money. So, so this is what we're working on in Europe. But there is a homework, I think, for all of us now, because the way that we in the Global Alliance for Tax Justice, the way that we approach the UN is to say all colleagues, all civil society now, they have the legitimate space to influence their own governments. So the way we all go to our own governments. And we all now, because all governments have a seat at the table, we all have influence. The problem we used to have is that when so many developing countries were not included in the negotiations at the OECD, there were so many colleagues that couldn't influence the global tax rules because their government didn't have any influence. And because the global tax rules impact all of us, we all have a democratic right to have a say and influence our governments. Now everyone is at the table, so now we all have a job to do. Another thing that has also changed is the point about standing at the toilet and waiting for the decision makers to come. And the problem at the OECD was also that we were not allowed to be in the room. We were not even allowed to be in the building. We were completely shut out of the negotiations. We weren't allowed to see the negotiating text. We were not able to hold our governments to account. We didn't know who was negotiating for which country. We didn't know what they were saying. At the United Nations, a completely different story. We get to be in the room, we can make interventions, we can walk up to our negotiators, we can see what they're saying. We are able to do our job. So, the great challenge that we have now is that now the negotiations are starting. So now we need to start answering the questions of how do we want to tax multinational corporations? How do we want to tax the world's richest? We know that they need to pay their share of tax, but now we need to get more specific on how we can do this. And luckily, there are a lot of good thinkers in the civil society network. We have colleagues all over the world who are facing the problem of tax injustice. So there is so much experience already from so many different countries, and we really now need to work together to make sure that we all come with our different perspectives, because no one understands the problem all around the world. But if we are together, then we can get an overview. So it's an amazing opportunity. It's fantastic. We're at the point where we can start saying, okay, let's get specific about the solutions. And on the negotiations moving forward, the developed countries, they'll have to make up their minds. I think we're also just seeing them be very confused. They thought that they could keep dominating the global tax rules. Now it's very clear they can't. But the important thing is that we need to move forward. We need to keep arguing that all countries have an interest in a real effective and fair global tax system. Even the developed countries, everyone has an interest in this. And then if they want to join, that's good. If they want to vote no and abstain and be obstructive, we can't wait for them. We have to move forward now. So I agree. It's an amazing time, and when the negotiations move forward in February, it's going to be really, really exciting to watch this. One of the issues that we managed to get very well included is taxation in the digitalized economy, which I know has been, we have a real expert on that, which is Tony. So there'll be some very, very important questions to answer on that in the future, but also on extractive industries is one area where I think we still need to do more thinking on exactly how we want the rules to be. But now we have all the options open. So it's going to be an extremely exciting time going forward. And lastly, also on tax on the environment. That's another issue that is included, but there we also need to get specific. There are some options about having, for example, we could have an extra corporate tax on industries that are extremely polluting. And we can say that you created profits in a highly polluting way, and therefore there is a polluter pays profit tax on your profits because you are a timber company, an oil company, whichever you want. So there are some options like that. We need to discuss. We haven't made decisions yet, but this is definitely the time to start finding exactly the elements that we want to go into the UN Tax Convention. I'll hold off there, but just want to thank you all for the kind invitation. It's a joy to be here with you all today, but also for the great partnership and all the fantastic work that we've done together. I think it's really a day to celebrate the global alliance that we have and all the great results that it's getting us. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tove. Thank you very much, Tove. Yeah, it's although negotiation are still ongoing, it is encouraging to hear your update on how developing country are reclaiming their taxing rights. Yeah, and it's also delightful to see the effort to bring all countries on the table as equal partners in reshaping the global tax system. I think this is really significant step toward a more equitable and inclusive framework. And I think this is can be also an example how developing countries in everywhere seeing CSOs as equal partner, because as mentioned by Arjun before, that many times government try to ignore the CSO's voice, but we know that the current dynamics happen in the UN is also because of the effort and the work hard from the CSOs around the globe. Thank you very much. And now, of course, even though we need to celebrate this achievement, there are still many problems that we are dealing with. And then we also need to convince ourselves that the UN Tax Convention can also effective as a tool to challenge the problem on digital economy, and also the problem of the capacity constraint in developing countries when we are adopting this UN tax framework. Not to mention that also we have emerging trends like environmental and carbon tax, where also this issue is designed and driven by developed countries, and then how these all issues intersects with global tax policies, and how we can use this UN tax framework to, to strengthen revenue generation for developing country. So I'm sure that this discourse is very relevant to Tony, because he has been working a lot about digital economy and seeing also about the capacity constraint in the developing country, where the digital economy mostly become of the problem. Like also Tove mentioned before, in the digital economy, mostly the investor or the owner of the companies argue that the tax should be done in the headquarter office, not in the developing country, where all of us are actually the user or the consumers, and we pay for all the digital economy activities that they have here in developing countries. So Tony, now the floor is yours. And after Tony, we are going to have a session of question and answer from everyone in online and on site here. Okay, Tony, time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Hernie. Thanks so much, Tove and Melly, for your presentations. I think that will make my presentation much, much easier. So I was asked to discuss the digital economy or the taxation of e-commerce or electronic commerce. Actually, those two terms are interchangeable. So don't worry about the specifics or what have you. So I want to begin by saying I'd like to take off from what Tove mentioned with regard to the League of Nations. So actually, if you take a look at it, the current tax architecture, the current international tax architecture started out in 1920. So it's more than 100 years old. But unlike the WTO agreements, what we have in international taxation is not a treaty where everyone is a party. Like, for example, the WTO agreements on trade in goods, agriculture, etc., etc. We don't have that. When we speak of international tax architecture, we speak about a huge number of tax treaties, bilateral tax treaties, and at the same time principles of law, tax law, that are adopted by most, if not all, countries. So, for example, the issue of physical presence or permanent establishment, and this goes into obviously into the digital economy and e-commerce. So a foreign corporation, let me be a bit more technical, a non-resident foreign corporation, when doing business in another country without physical presence or permanent establishment, is not taxable on its income from that country. I think that's the gist of the problem. If only we can, that's our only takeaway. I think that's more than enough, no? So obviously the tax tools that were set up in the 1920s didn't have this thing about e-commerce. So you still have then what, for example, Japan exporting cars to Indonesia or ASEAN countries, etc., etc. The Toyota company is not taxable in Indonesia just because it exported cars to Indonesia, right? And perhaps you can argue that, well, fine, okay, they're not doing a real business in Indonesia nor the Philippines, so that's okay. We don't need to tax them, except that of course you can impose tariffs. Unfortunately, more and more it's being reduced or eliminated. But if you take a if you contrast that in terms of the digital economy. The digital platforms, typically called the GAFAMs, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, not the GAFAMs in general. The digital platforms, they do not need to go to Indonesia to do or earn tons and tons of money in Indonesia, right? So they can operate in Silicon Valley. And by the way, I used to work there with the enemy, I guess. So I have kind of some idea of what's done in terms of tax planning and what have you. So for example, the GAFAMs doing business or operating in Silicon Valley and providing services to Indonesian customers and corporations, under the current rules, they're not taxable in Indonesia because they argue and well, I guess using the old terms, yeah, they don't have physical presence. They don't have what's called in treaty law as a permanent establishment, meaning they don't have a branch, they don't have a representative office, they don't have a factory, etc., etc. So they're taxable only in the United States of America. So that's where the problem sets in, right? So they make a lot of money in Indonesia without being taxable in Indonesia. Oh, by the way, as an aside, it's also a competition policy issue, right? Because to the extent that they're exempt from income tax and to the extent that they compete against local companies in Indonesia, then that's a competition policy issue, right? So that is the problem. So let's call the Indonesia, in this case, the market jurisdiction in using the terms of the OECD, no? So that's the problem. In fairness to the OECD, they got the problem correct, right? It's not taxable in Indonesia, making tons of money. So we have to have an agreement where the GAFAMs will be taxable in Indonesia and other ASEAN countries. Okay. Now the problem is with respect to the prescription of the OECD. Pillar 1 of the OECD provides that we will take a look at the big multinational companies making business all over the world, the GAFAMs of the world. But we will include in scope company only those companies which make more than 20 billion euros a year. So that's one threshold. The other threshold is that we will only tax anything in excess of the 10% margin. Of course, the anything that what they call that in English, that relative pronoun anything could mean 0 to 1 billion, could mean 0 to, I don't know, 500 rupiah only. And it doesn't mean anything, right? And if that in-scope company has something in excess of 10%, that will be divided among all of the market jurisdictions where the GAFAMs are making money. The Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Africa, etc., etc. At the end of the day, you can just imagine how little that is. So it's really important that this thing be discussed at the United Nations, because as mentioned earlier on by Tove and Meli, this cannot be discussed only at the OECD, which we know is unfortunately dominated by the rich countries. Some will go as far as to say that it's actually a G7 playing field, no? It's only the G7. So we have to discuss this at a very comprehensive level at the United Nations. So what have we been asking in terms of the UN Tax Convention? We want the UN Tax Convention to be as comprehensive as possible. There couldn't be any carve-outs for any industry or subsector whatsoever, much less a carve-out in terms of the digital economy and e-commerce. Because some are arguing, since this thing is already being discussed at the OECD BEPS, base erosion and profit shifting, the inclusive framework, they say. And they also add that there are now, I think, 143 countries, no? Including Indonesia and the Philippines, and I think all ASEAN countries are part of the OECD inclusive framework on BEPS. Since that is being discussed at that space, then let's not discuss it anymore at the United Nations. But as Tove mentioned earlier on, I mean, during the BEPS negotiations, the developing countries, I should say, were not even given a voice. And I think 1/3 of the countries are not part of BEPS, especially the African countries. So yeah, it has to be. And from a technical standpoint, it doesn't make sense to have parallel rules, one for the digital economy and the other for the rest, like the manufacturing, mining, etc., etc. And as if that's not enough, I tried to take a look at the different sectors, no? And I was kind of surprised, or maybe not so surprised, that the digital economy permeates all sectors practically, from manufacturing, from the extractive industry, from even construction, the big construction. Adhikaya, no, in Indonesia, no? I think PT Adhikaya, that's one of the big companies, no, in Indonesia construction. The digital economy is present in all of those. The international tax rules and even national tax rules are already complicated enough. Can you imagine having to bifurcate rules, one for the digital economy, one for the rest? It doesn't make sense. In fact, if I may cite one good example, how long did it take people, or I think they still arguing about it, to delineate software income into income from intangible property, or income from services, or income for what have you, right? I mean, if they took it, if it's taking them decades to argue about that, can you imagine arguing that point with regard to all sectors? And not to mention also, what they call this services, right? The banking, insurance, etc., etc. So it's really important that everything is placed at the United Nations. We cannot have a situation where there is a carve out of any section whatsoever. I would like to mention also the point of Arjun. No? He made a good point, but it's not 100% true that we have not been engaging. In fact, we have been locking horns even with the IMF. No, we have had arguments even with the IMF, even with the OECD. So, for example, in the case of the Philippines, when there was a tax vote in November 2022, we were able to offer a resolution in the Philippine Senate, and it was signed by a Philippine senator. And during the confirmation hearing of the Minister of Finance, he was cornered to saying that, okay, the Philippines will vote yes. And so in terms of wealth tax that was mentioned earlier on, we actually, we together with PRAKARSA, incidentally, no, we had I think a 2-year or 3-year project on wealth tax, no, and eventually the wealth tax bill in the Philippines was sponsored by 2 legislators 2 weeks ago. So with regard to the tax convention, we intend to draft again resolutions for the Senate and the House of Representatives of the Philippines, commending the Philippine government for voting yes. Just a couple of minor points, if perhaps. One is the argument of some sectors, especially in the rich countries, that taxation, especially digital taxation, is very technical and should be left to the experts only. That's a very, very false argument, especially so when we consider that the taxing power actually resides in the people. It's our right. We just devolve it or delegated it to our congresses, to our parliaments, right? So it's not true that it's something technical that's beyond our reach, no? Number 2, while this tax negotiations are going on, are about to start, rightly, many countries are starting to impose digital services tax, or in Indonesia, it's called the goods and services tax, no? In Indonesia, and I think in Singapore also, right? So those are being imposed precisely because there's no there's no agreement yet on how to tax the digital economy or e-commerce. Unfortunately, the DST and the goods and services tax is being demonized by some sectors as being quote-unquote unilateral imposition. That's a very disingenuous term because 90%, if not 99% of tax laws are unilateral. Almost all of tax laws are passed by legislatures. Obviously, they are unilateral. Finally, they will try to divert our attention. They will say that the problem with respect to digital economy and taxation in general that we are trying to address to the United Nations is only an issue of administrative. It's only an issue of administration. So they will say, well, we will just provide you with technical assistance in terms of administration. And that's not true. There's really a problem with regard to the international architecture that has to be addressed and could be addressed and should be addressed only at the United Nations. I think that's all. I'm sorry if it's kind of too long. Itu saja. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih, Tony. Yeah, we just heard again, from Tony that amplify our view that various reasons have been created by multinational companies and supported by the government in the European continent to support their business. In fact, we also knew that in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, we received that a publication from the EU with title Protecting European Business and Fair Taxation for GAFAMs. So that title is very powerful and sounds like fair, but it's totally opposite. And then we also have heard from Tony in many types of how the European, how the multinational companies that mostly based in Europe try to undermine the national capacity in, you know, taxing the companies and paying what they supposedly pay with what they have gained from their activities, because they definitely gain a lot of profit from us, but they don't, in return they don't want to pay anything. So I think we have heard from many perspectives. Most are very insightful, and I think this is a good discussion for us. And then we can have further discussion with the participants here in the hotel, and also those who are attending this webinar online. Like if you guys have a questions to our speakers, unfortunately Mbak Esa and Arjun are no longer here with us, but if you have a question that you guys would like to address to Mbak Esa or Arjun, we can note the question and also communicate the questions. But we have Tony, Tove, and Meliana here, and of course we can have we still have about 15 minutes, yes, for discussion and answer. So anyone from here in the room or online would like to have a questions to our speakers? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, maybe please introduce yourself and from which organization are you coming from, and to whom the question is addressed to.
Thank you, Mbak Herni. Thank you for the discussion. It's amazing, and I would like to repeat Maria's word. It's an amazing opportunity, very timely. And I agree that UN Tax Convention brings hopes for us to address global tax challenges, tax evasion, illicit financial flows. And I think Indonesia, at the position, Indonesia might receive more benefit because of these initiatives, especially because of the capacity building process, and also a fairer global tax competition, and so on and so forth. But as much as I trust the United Nations, I still doubt that we will receive consensus in the next coming years, at least in the next 5-10 years. And I think this is an issue. I think I'm still thinking at the pragmatic ways, because the damage happens right now. And what should we do in the next coming 5 years, let's say? And that's the question, because what I can see right now, we don't want, we still want to see it. We don't want the government use these initiatives to blame the international organizations and to blame external factors, while rather the damage has been done at the country level. A significant issue, the significant problem right now is at the country level. So I think that's the question, I guess, that we need to answer, because whatever the decision, the consensus at the global level, the implementation would be success depending on the capacity of the country level. And I just want to, I think our minister is a former managing director of the World Bank, and then over the last 10 years, our tax ratio is still stagnant. We don't move towards a more progressive tax system. Yes, she failed, and I cannot imagine that she's gonna sit with the UN still with a very conventional approach. So I think the only hope right now is to have a better capacity building, I guess. That can be provided by anyone, I guess, at the UN, because the government, especially Indonesia, they won't trust the CSOs, the local CSOs, but they're still thinking that the UN is something else. So I just have a a simple request is to send a more progressive scholars to any country, to developing countries, so that the government officer could receive a more progressive, efficient approach towards our future tax development. Because I'm still thinking that many government officer at the finance ministry level in any country, they've been doing unnecessary things rather than improving the tax system in the country. So that's the problem, because the problem is at the vision of the policymakers. So I think that's my concern. Of course, there is a hope, but we still have to manage our expectation to some extent. And for Tony, a quick question. I think this is rather a technical question. How do you think what would be the best way to improve the government capacity in order to estimate the valuation of the digital companies, that has how much the revenues generated by the digital companies from the country users? Still, this is an issue. I have not yet seen a very strong study that could be a very strong toolkit by the government in order to estimate this valuation, because we lose so much, but we don't know how much, something like that. So I think that's all, Mbak Herni.
Thank you, Mas Media. So one more question perhaps from the room and then from online participant, if any.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you for the all panelists, wise and insightful presentation. Maybe I will take a moment to share a bit about myself. My name is Jalodi Muhammad. I'm working as a researcher at Celios with Professor Media Wahidi Askar. Yeah, where I focus on economic disparity, distribution of resources, and fiscal impact the marginalized communities. I want to kick things off by pointing out that Indonesians' economic growth right now isn't looking great. If we check out the proportion of disposable income to per capita GDP, it's been dropping and is currently at just 72.7%. This means the middle is feeling the squeeze and has less money to pay to spend. The fact is that we are facing the shrinking the middle class into the lower class. On top of that, even though we're investing in infrastructure and key national project strategies national, maybe this haven't really helped boost purchasing power and household income significant. Okay. Yeah, it's very clear. In the other side, debt interest in Indonesia context is up until 254% from 2015 to 2025. At the same time, capital spending is actually down by 12%. And if we're looking at the peak of the maturing debt, we are talking about a huge IDR X 100 trillion each year. Yeah, from 2025 to 2029. So with all that in mind, are the current intensified tax policy relevant for developed countries, especially in Indonesia context, while ordinary citizens are taxed more than the upper class who are good at avoiding tax? We have got a 12% increase in value-added tax and new tax on micro, small, medium enterprises, and which are hitting lower middle income household hard. Yeah, maybe it's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Mas Media and Mas Gala ya. Galau? Oh, yeah. So okay, so I'd like to give an opportunity to participant online. So Samir, is there anyone who want to ask from online participant? No one? Okay, then I'll give time to all speakers to respond to the two participants. I didn't note anything because I was like quite enjoying the question that they raised here. So I'll give Mbak Yenti. Oh, okay, sorry, Mbak Yenti. So one more question from here, from the room, yeah. Okay, so because no one from online, yeah, use the opportunity, so I'll give the time for you. Okay, thank you, Mbak Erni. Hi, Tony, Topher, and Melly. Hi, my name is Yenti Nur Hidayat. Yenti from Center for Indonesian Law and Budget Studies, or we call it in Indonesia Puskaha Indonesia. Yeah, uh, I can understand and imagine when Topher said that there are a lot of challenges about to adopt the UN Tax Convention for many countries, because this is not only for rich country, middle income country, also for poor country, because uh, for rich country it's will look like to open your wallet and show to everyone that, hey, I have a lot of money here. And for the middle income and poor country, the main challenges is about the corruption, because this UN tax convention, if I not wrong to interpretation, is about to open the data, the tax data, and sharing to everyone in the world, and we can use that to improve to make justice for the poor people and others. And why I said that for the middle income and poor country, especially where the corruption very high, because this will cut the opportunity from the corruptor to make a lot of corruption, and then they will lose many things. That's why it's will be very difficult to to make sure many countries to adopt this convention. And I would like to know if both of you is there any we need more uh proof to make sure to make many countries then agree with this convention. Do you know any uh like best practices, very practical, that can prove that this convention, if they agree with this and they do that, and they will get benefit from this convention? I think it will very important for us to say that, to give this proof to many countries. Thank you. Thank you, Kayeti. So I'll give the time to all of you, the speakers. Maybe can be from Tove and Meliana and Tony.
Yes, thank you so much for the great questions, and also thank you, Melly and Tony, for I think a very interesting discussion today. A few points on the questions. On the point about can we have capacity building? Yes, I think what we're doing now is exactly what we need to do. We're sharing information. The capacity building is needed on all sides. I think those of us who follow the UN negotiations very closely, we need to share the information. But we also need capacity building because this is going to be a global agreement that has impacts all around the world. It's going to tie together over 190 tax systems. It's a very, very important agreement for tax systems all around the world. And we need to understand the realities at the national level, sometimes even at the local level. We need to understand the different types of challenges in countries. For example, on taxation of the extractive industries, it's a special area, and we need the countries that have a lot of extractive activities to come and capacity build us, basically. Tony's work on the digitalized economy is a great example of having people specialize in areas and capacity build everybody else. So we're all going to have to capacity build each other, but that's also where civil society, we are ahead. Now it's the first time that all governments have a meeting where everyone can participate as equals. Civil society is ahead. We have been talking across boundaries for many years, and we are more ready. So that also means, though, that we have a lot of homework to do, because on this issue, governments really listen a lot to what we say. And now we're getting more and more detailed questions. So it's great that we have influence, but it also means that we have to develop good ideas. At the same time, I very much agree with Tony. It's not true that tax has to be extremely technical and complex. Taxation of multinational corporations is a great example. You can take a company and tax it on the profits that they have made at the global level. You can divide that between the countries that where the economic activity has taken place, and then they can all tax it. It can be quite simple. It's a political choice that they have opted for a very, very crazy and complex transfer pricing system that never worked and has literally thousands of pages of rules. But that's actually a part of the problem, and that's what created all the loopholes. It doesn't have to be complicated. There are issues discussed at the United Nations that are much more complex. Climate change and emissions, it's a natural ecosystem that is actually complex. Taxation is something we made up, and we can change it. And making it simpler, more logical, and fair is going to be a key part of the exercise. In terms of best practices and benefits for governments on cooperation, tax is a great example. First of all, they fought global North and South about who should get to tax it, the money. And then all the money ended in tax havens. So in some way, a lot of countries lost in both the global North and South. It's a great example of a complete failure of cooperation. And then countries started defending themselves. And there I also agree with Tony that introducing national level taxes, that means that companies start paying tax in your country. Digital services taxes is an example. That's actually a good thing that countries start taking responsibility and introducing fairness where they can at the national level. But this is also something where we see developing countries under pressure to stop using these mechanisms, and it's going to be a big part of the discussion going forward. But digital services taxes is a great example because what the OECD has said is you're not allowed to introduce any new digital services taxes. Some European countries already introduced them, and in France, it's actually making quite a lot of money. What the OECD has said, it's okay that France keeps it, but developing countries can't follow this example. It's deeply unfair. But the result when countries introduce their own taxes is that the tax system becomes very incoherent. Companies get afraid that they might get taxed in many different countries in many different ways, and they will. And this is actually an argument for a global agreement. And sometimes we even have big multinational corporations supporting a UN agreement because at least we get more clarity. They're going to pay more tax, but at least it's not going to be chaos and conflicts. So best practices on cooperating, often what you see is that countries cooperate because the alternative is so bad, where you have chaos and conflicts and uncertainty. And we definitely have that on tax as well. And then in the global north, what we can say in many countries is, yes, you're going to have to share the money with developing countries. You can't get all the money for yourself. It's just not fair. But at the same time, you can work together on stopping tax havens. Right now, you're not getting any money because it's in tax havens. So you lost anyway. If you share it with developing countries, you can stand together on stopping tax havens. It means everybody gets more money. You're not going to get it all. You're going to have to get used to that. But this is what we're saying to the high tax countries in the global north, and they're actually interested. So I think we can do a lot in the global north to push things forward. I'm very hopeful. But in the coming years, we have a big job to do in capacity building each other and holding our governments to account. Sometimes we get asked here in the global north whether we are on the same team as developing countries, and what we're saying is we're civil society. We're keeping governments to account in all countries, and we're going to be there. If governments support our proposals, that's good, and we welcome that. But we are not on any team. We are civil society, and we are an independent voice. But we just happen to agree with developing countries on the fact that writing global tax rules and excluding them from the process, that's not fair. So yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity, and now all countries are at the table and we're in the room. Now we're going to draft a global tax system that's fair and effective. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you, Tove. And Mbak Melly, would you like
Yeah.
to on the questions?
Yes, I think I would like to add some answer to what mass media already stated before. Yeah, we know that the damage from the tax avoidance based erosion is occurring now, and so what can be done by the national level to address this issue? I think the first one is, we know that the negotiation about the UN tax is gonna take so many years. Yeah, let's see, it's gonna be like maybe 1, 2, 3, or 3 years in the future. But the things that can do by the national level, I think it should be strengthen the national tax policy, because the countries must prioritize reforming and enhancing their national tax policy, because this includes improving the tax collection mechanism, and they should make sure that there is reducing the tax avoidance with the better enforcement. And we know in some cases in Indonesia, there's so many tax avoidance or evasion. It comes from that the multinational using the loopholes from the policy. So that's why the first thing that should be done by the national level is to strengthen the national tax policy. And the second one is we try to foster the domestic consensus on tax reform in national level, because we have to building consensus among the national stakeholders like the government body, with the private sector representative, and also the CSO, and maybe we can also involve the public, and we can make like or we can engage in open dialogue, consult with diverse stakeholder, and maybe The other thing that we can do, like to make like a roadmap for the sustainable tax reform in the national level, that it can be aligned to the global standard that's set by the UN Tax Convention. I think maybe that's the second one, able to do that in the national level. And the third one, the important thing also, how we can make sure or encourage the transparency and accountability. We know some of the governments already adopt the transparency of the financial transaction, and maybe some country can also implement the initiative like the disclosure of the beneficial ownership, and then we have to push in the national level to make sure there is a public country by country reporting that should be published to the public, and automatic exchange of tax related the information to answer the company and individuals cannot hide behind the opaque structure. Yeah, I think maybe that's three of it. We can do it firstly in the national level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Meli. And the last, Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Hernie. Yeah, so I think there were a lot of things that were raised that would basically the overarching theme is that we shouldn't have a tax convention yet because we have this problem A, B, C, D. I think that kind of reasoning is actually kind of flawed. Despite all of this, of course, there's corruption in the Philippines. Of course, there's a need for more tax training, right? But of course, I will not readily concede that the tax authorities in Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia do not have technical capacity. I mean, to be fair, I mean these people have been working at those things all of their lives, no? But still, even assuming that shouldn't prevent us from having a tax convention, which we believe is the only solution, including the one, how do we estimate the possible revenues, right? Of course, you don't try to estimate the revenue, and only if you find out what the estimate is, only then you impose tax. It doesn't work. The real life doesn't work that way, right? You see certain transactions, you see certain kinds of income that should be taxed, then you impose income in those things, and you don't try to overthink and overanalyze everything before you start moving in the right direction, no? I also want to mention a thing that was not raised, the issue of double taxation. A lot of countries will argue that if you impose digital services tax and GST, then that would amount to double taxation. Of course, people who are saying that are actually, I don't know, either confused or lying, because there's such thing as a tax credit. If you pay income tax in one country, then you credit that to the income tax that you will pay in your resident country. And I think all countries have that tax credit. So that's a very false argument. I like the issue of the upper class and the asymmetry in the tax system. I think if another thing that we can take out of this exercise in trying to draft a UN tax treaty is that at the domestic level, there are asymmetries in the tax system. I think of all countries. I'm very sure about the US and the Philippines. And what am I talking about? So when we speak about very rich people, their income does not come from work, from employment, or selling goods and services. Their income or their wealth come from, and there's a study of this, no? They come from inheritance and income from capital gains. When they sell their land, when they sell their shares of stock, they earn certain kind of gain, and that gain is capital gains tax is imposed on that gain. And you will be surprised that the percentage of capital gains tax is lower than the rate of income tax imposed on ordinary employees, right? So there's a basic unfairness in that system. It should be the other way around, right? If you're rich, then you're supposed to pay higher taxes on your capital gains, on your inheritance, and the working people should pay less tax in terms of their compensation income. But the problem is, as we all know, it's what they call this, a question of low-lying fruit, a question of low resistance. It's very easy to impose compensation income because you just take it from the withholding tax of the employee, right? It's very easy to impose value-added tax and excise tax because you can impose it right away. It's very difficult to impose capital gains tax. It's very difficult to impose corporate income tax. No? It's even more difficult, in fact, even impossible sometimes, to impose estate tax on the inheritance of rich people. So we have to address also that asymmetry in the national tax systems.
Okay, thank you. So we have one question from online, from Netra. Okay. So Netra is one of our colleagues from SAPE. SAPE is South Asia Alliance for Poverty Eradications, who is now becoming an excellency, an ambassador for Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So congratulations, Netra, for new assignment. So his question is about, can someone explain a bit more on negative consequences the UN Tax Convention will have to developing countries and people if there are negative consequences? Yeah, so who want to respond to this question first? Okay, Tove, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a very important question to be aware of. Basically, if we get the rules wrong, it can be very harmful to developing countries. These are some very, very important economic issues. And if the tax system of a country fails, it's a very fundamental problem. It undermines the government's ability to have a healthy budget and finance public services and so forth. So the UN Tax Convention can become harmful. But one important thing to remember is that we don't have much to lose. Basically, we have a global tax system where tax havens are already stealing so much of the money from global north and global south. But in addition to that, we've really seen an example of the richest countries writing the rules and forcing them on developing countries. We've had all sorts of pressure, and developing countries are saying this very clearly in the UN tax negotiations now. We had Ghana make an intervention saying that there was arm twisting involved when they were pushed to sign on to the OECD rules, and that Ghana was told that if they didn't sign, there would be consequences. They also said, we know that others have had the same experience. We had other African negotiators point out, we've been capacity built on the rules. People have come and explained the OECD rules to us. And we can see that those rules mean that we are not allowed to tax the profits of corporations that are in our country making money. So it's not about capacity building, it's about the rules being wrong. And probably the most brutal part is that developing countries that have tried not to follow the rules, they have been blacklisted. The EU has a blacklist where they put them on. They have been under all types of pressure. And the developing countries and all countries, they have ways they can protect themselves. For example, there's something called withholding taxes. It's that a country taxes all money that leaves the country. But one of the things that have happened over the last 100 years is that countries have been signing treaties to lower these withholding taxes so that they have opened their economies, which means that money can fly out without being taxed. And therefore, we are in a quite extreme situation. Global inequality is really growing rapidly. Small and medium enterprises that are creating jobs and are a very important part of the economy have to compete with big multinational corporations from the global north. that come, and because they can abuse taxes and lower their own tax rate, they're competing at an unfair level. So yes, if we get the rules wrong, it can be very, very problematic for developing countries. It's very important that we pay attention and that we make sure we create fair rules that lower inequalities both within countries and between countries. But the good news is that I find it hard to think of a tax system that would be worse than what we already have.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, but Melly, please.
Okay, I want to add some to the question that Neta already stated. That's really good question, I think. In my opinion, maybe the negative risks is about, although the UN Tax Conventions is aimed to curb the illicit financial flow and etc., it's also possible that this global tax standard could still be exploited by the wealthy individuals or corporation, I think. If the convention is not carefully crafted, there may still be opportunity for the MNC using the loopholes in this convention. And the second one is, while the convention is designed to be inclusive, but the reality is not all the developing country will not benefit equally, because we have to consider that there is a countries with larger and more diversified economic, and there is a country with the smaller or less developed economic, and yeah, I think the smaller or less developed developing country could find it more difficult to assert their tax right or benefit from the provision of the convention, because there's a condition about the size of the economic, the diverse side of the economic between the developing country. Yeah, maybe just two of it I want to add. Maybe Tony, you want to add?
Thank you. So I think the most obvious one is the carve out. If we allow a carve out, that will be a big, huge problem. If we allow countries to carve out the taxation of the digital economy, then we're really in a huge kind of trouble. And as Melly mentioned, even if we have a UN tax convention, the multinational companies and the rich people will still resort to tax planning. So they will still, because a lot of these things are actually prohibited in their particular countries, no? Even in the rich countries. So in rich countries, they have what's called controlled foreign corporation rules that will, for example, in the US, if a US company sets up a wholly owned subsidiary in another jurisdiction, typically that wholly owned subsidiary is not taxable in the US unless that subsidiary repatriates profits in terms of dividends, interest, royalties, etc., etc., etc. But since 1962, they set up a system where, if you're trying to abuse the migration of US companies through controlled foreign corporations, even if you don't repatriate profits, we will tax that. We will tax you for the activities of your subsidiary in another tax jurisdiction. No, it kind of even surpasses what's called the piercing the veil of corporate entity. We will just tax you because of the activity of your and even if you have a tax convention, I'm sure MNCs will continue to push the envelope, and more so in the era of globalization and the era of use of e-commerce. Because the most important asset of corporations right now is not even land or not even machineries. The most important asset is what's called intangible property. That intangible property is the one factor of production or economic factor that gives the most amount of revenues to the multinational company. And the problem is, with the advent of the global economy and digitalization, they can easily migrate that intangible property to other places that suits their interest, be it in a jurisdiction which doesn't tax that kind of thing, or in a jurisdiction where they think they can that the taxes are lower, or where they think they can put all of their all of their income, because it escapes gross income classification. Despite the UN Tax Convention, I'm sure multinational companies will resort to what's called a foreign sales corporation. So instead of selling, for example, in Germany, they will set up a foreign sales corporation somewhere else. Although the goods will be exported from Germany to Indonesia, they will say on paper that it's being exported to the Cayman Islands. Although we all know that there's an umbrella there and 3 folders. There's no activity going on there. Still, they will try to push the envelope. And these are things that they have done through the years. No, in fact, to give one good example, the U.S. lost, I think, in 2000 or before 2000 at the WTO because of because they used what's called foreign sales corporation, and the WTO said that's illegal subsidy. You know what the US did? They changed the nomenclature. They called it extraterritorial income. Again, they lost again, and on and on and on. So unfortunately, taxation is a cat and mouse game. You know, multinational corporations will devise tax planning to escape, and then we will adopt. Countries will adopt and then they will think of something else, and then we will try to adapt. That's the name of the game. There's no perfect system. We just have to keep on pushing and keep on pushing to, extract as much tax as possible, but being fair at the same time.
Thank you. Very meaty discussion. I really enjoy this discussion. We are actually, our time is running out right now, but we still have one more, the last participant who would like to ask. And since I'm the moderator, I'll use my authority to give the time to this participant, because I think this discussion is very rare to happen. It's not like once in a month. So please, I need your approval, especially from the speakers, to give the time. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. My name Bagus Pradana from Transparency International Indonesia. I have some question. First, I still remember in 2016, I think you can check the media. The President of Indonesia at the time expressed a statement to establish a tax haven.
I think it's frozen, no?
Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Been working very well until now, but now it froze.
For online participant, we are so sorry that we lost the connection, and we are still trying to connect again.
No worries.
Okay, that's okay. We'll wait.
1 minute, please.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
Oh, now we lost them all together.
Tove, do you know the exact dates of the negotiations in February?
It's from the 3rd to the 6th of February.
Okay.
And they're supposed to adopt the modalities, the rules of procedure for the negotiations. They also have to decide what the second protocol should be on. So it'll be very intense.
Yeah.
There's a lot on that meeting. So, but at least digital tax is non-negotiable. That one is sorted. But the second protocol will be a big issue. So yes, book your flights.
Let's see. I'd love to, but let's see.
Would be
Hello,
great.
everyone.
Yeah.
We can start again.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. We're just coordinating a bit.
problem.
Yeah, thank you. We back again. I just wanna share some story about Indonesia, actually. So I still remember in 2016, the president of Indonesia at the time expressed a statement to establish tax haven in Indonesia. And recently, this idea of tax haven resurfaced again as a part of the development agenda for new capital city IKN in Indonesia. So this is the one side, and other side, moreover, many Indonesian business people have been involved in tax avoidance practice. Our research reveal the practice of shell companies and nominee by Indonesian business people. They registering their company in the tax haven countries. We got that fact. And fun fact, the several company are the concession holder for national strategic project in Indonesia called PSN. So I want to ask some question. No, some only one question. I think in light of the UN Convention goal to combat the tax avoidance, how can this convention help the country like Indonesia? I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so Tony and Tove, perhaps you can respond to the question because Meliana is just asked permission that she needs to leave earlier due to other meeting.
Yeah, go ahead, Tove.
Maybe Melly, since you're just here, do you want to
Oh, yeah,
quickly
yeah.
say something before you leave?
You want to respond before you leave?
I think the one that I want to say is same like what my answer to mass media before, that there is something that we can do in national level. We know that we have to make like a tax reform, strengthening the tax policy in national level. Yeah, maybe under that because I have to leave in another meeting. Okay, just that, Baherni. Thank you so much for all. Thank you, Tony, thank you, and all participants. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Melly. See you.
Next
Thank you, Melly.
session.
It's
Yeah.
been great. Tony, do you want to go first?
Okay. Well, obviously you have to engage the ministries, no? So just like in all other countries, it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I believe, in Indonesia, no, which will vote on the UN tax treaty or will engage. But so, for example, in the Philippines, when we spoke to the Foreign Affairs, they said that okay, it's them formally who is negotiating, but actually they defer to the Ministry of Finance. So you have to really speak with the two ministries, no? Now that you mentioned the National Strategic Project, I wonder if in Indonesia, taxation of state-owned enterprises is an issue. Because in a lot of economies, especially in developing countries, state-owned enterprises play a big part, no? So I don't know to what extent the UN tax treaty will be relevant to state-owned corporations. So I think that's something that we have to figure out actually, because that can actually dissuade developing countries from agreeing to certain sections of the tax treaty.
Great. And yeah, I think this is a really valuable perspective. And we see in a lot of countries, also in Europe, but also around the world, that more and more countries are trying to become tax havens. We call it the race to the bottom. The political driver is very clear. Basically, what they're saying is if we can't beat them, if we can't stop the tax havens, the only thing we can do is to try and get a little part of the game. And it's not legit. The government shouldn't do this. It's not okay. But it's a political reality that we're seeing. It's exactly why, oops, now we lost them again. Are they there?
Yes, we hear you, Tove.
Okay, super. Sorry. It's exactly why we need cooperation so that we can stop this race to the bottom. And on these arguments for why we can't tax the rich and the big corporations, for me, it's very odd that governments are saying it's easier to introduce a VAT than to introduce a wealth tax. A VAT means that in every little corner shop, in every little street shop, if anyone buys a bottle of water, there's a tax on every transaction. The VAT is actually an extremely complex tax, but governments have been very good at introducing this tax all in every little shop. But I don't understand why that is easier than introducing a tax when a big shareholder gets a payout from an investment, or when a big corporation cashes in a big profit on their activities. So we really need to challenge these arguments for why you can only tax the poor and not the rich. And we need to stop this race to the bottom. It's not okay when countries start competing. They call it tax competition. This race to the bottom, tax is not an issue of competition. It's an absolutely fundamental component of the way our countries are supposed to work. So it's simply not okay that their countries start becoming tax havens. But this is something we've seen all over the world, and now we have a chance to change it.
Oh, thank you very much. I think we already passed the time for our discussion, but it's such a great process that we have today, and we really hope that today's discussion will be one of the continue discussion that hosted by Indonesia Tax Justice Forum, which I forgot to mention at the earlier, that the discussion is part of the ongoing effort of the Indonesia Tax Justice Forum in promoting a fair and equitable tax system. And next month, we also plan to have another similar webinar like this on 11th of December on wealth tax in collaboration with SAPE. And the next month webinar is to respond to the G20 agreement in Brazil on the wealth tax. So to close this discussion, I'd like to again express my gratitude to all the speakers and all participants here in the room and who attend this webinar until end by online. And I would like to mention that we have seen a lot of luxury situation enjoyed by developed countries, which are mostly located in Europe and other countries. And I think those luxury live is deeply unethical, especially because they gain what they enjoy coming from Indonesia and other poor country, and they gain profit from developing countries. And in Indonesia, I'd like to share that recently we have this meme spread in the social media saying that Finland struggling to spend its budget. And we feel that this is a mockery of the poverty faced by many countries in Asia and in Africa. So therefore, BEP should not be an option for us. We don't want rules created by a select few without ensuring equal involvement from others in the process. And last, we have to believe that the development of the UN Tax Convention is crucial, and we have to reclaim our rights to equal and universal prosperity.
And maybe good.
And we also need to hands in hands with our government to build our capacity to involve fully in the process of global taxation system. So again, thank you very much for everyone. See you in the next month webinar. I close here.
Thank you, Mbak Herni. Thank you, everyone. Terima kasih.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Tove.
much.
Samira.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks,
Tony.
Mbak.
See you soon.
Thank you, Mas Tony and Tove.